Hello, this is week 4 of our series, You Have Heard That It Is Said. We are looking at 6 things that Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5. If you have a Bible with you, then please get yourself to Matthew chapter 5. We are going to read this week from verses 33 to 37. But some background while you do that to help us kind of place our mind and get our brains engaged and be ready to connect with this. What's happening? Jesus has been working his way through some places, and he has been healing people and transforming situations. And so, as you can imagine, a crowd has gathered. We have moved to the top of a hill, and Jesus is communicating to his disciples, to those that are following him and to those that are listening. And we have this account in Matthew chapters 5, 6 and 7, known as the Sermon on the Mount. And these form part of 5 discourses in the Good News from Matthew that are really instructional, really some of the most practical teaching that we have from Jesus on discipleship. How are we to follow and obey? How are we to be faithful to God? Jesus gives us these instructions in these communications. And so Jesus has made the statement of himself that he fulfills the law. He hasn't come to abolish it. He hasn't come to remove it. He's not offering a parallel existence, but he is the completion of those things. He is the embodiment of those promises. He is the Messiah, and Jesus wants you to know that. And in his communications, Matthew wants you to know that. And so we need to pick up those themes and place ourselves in that headspace. So in all of that, Jesus is engaged in some of these things, in course correcting maybe some things that have been misunderstood or not taught very well or accurately, or some things that have been kind of floating around. And in these statements of authority and the kingship of Jesus, there are these "you have heard it said" statements, and there are 6 things that Jesus is course correcting on. And I feel it would be really helpful for us to spend some time with them, to understand them, to see what was going on then, and then how that helps and informs our following of Jesus now. I think there are still things that we hear said. I think there are a lot of opinions that are just not super helpful for us, and they are leading us and teaching us and taking us away from the things of God. And we need to grab a hold of those and let Jesus course correct some of our thinking, some of our speech, and some of our actions. And so that's what we're doing. We want to do that together. I want to encourage you to do that with community, so with other people. So be reading these things with other people, and be talking about these things with other people. These communications are not designed just to be one and done for you to watch on your way in between whatever else is happening on in life, but for you to pause and make a deliberate moment to connect with other people around these things. So I hope that's helping paint a picture of where we are and why we are doing this. This communication and these verses, I think about oaths. What's an oath? Do we care? Do we still take oaths? What's happening? I feel the language is maybe a little bit distracting and can be a little bit disconnecting for us. But I think it is super relevant, and I think it does speak to our existence now. So I'm going to read the verses for us, and then I will do my best to explain why I feel they're important and what is going on, and then what we can learn from it and how that helps us find and follow Jesus. So Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 to 37. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn." But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. So this is a course correction to a very complex and convoluted way around some old covenant instruction. The idea being that God of the highest value, God in control of all things, the creator of all things, the sustainer of all things. And so the ultimate commitment would be to declare an oath by God, not in a negative or a pejorative way, but as an assurance of God's faithfulness and the God and God alone's ability to create and to sustain, and to the power of God is what would have been sort of alluded to in that statement. And what's happened in a corruption of that system is that there are constantly workarounds being added or being nodded to, or if you had something that you wanted to get done, but you were going to employ a dishonest way to achieve that, or your behavior is just not really up to a standard of living in keeping with something that would be honoring to God or the ways of God, you could invoke an oath by something or towards something or on something. And this whole convoluted system had grown out of this idea of declaring that by God that things were true. And so there's this really kind of weird multi-layered complexity going on, and Jesus says no more. You're not to do that anymore. You're simply going to say yes or no. And there's multiple reasons for that, and in the addressing of this really complicated system and this rabbinic system of having to go to a teacher of the law to understand what you would declare your truth by, it gets really kind of messy and really complicated. So what's happening? There is this attempt to add value to convince people that you're no longer lying. Lying and dishonesty is so commonplace that there is a necessity to add value to assure people that the truth is being told. And that is as ridiculous as it sounds. And I think it's quite contemporary as well. I think we are used to value adds being put into a conversation or to a clause or to a commitment so that we gain the assurance or the trust of another so that we can achieve what we want to achieve. And we make promises and we say, I swear, and we all remember kind of playground silliness around this stuff, and you say, I swear on my mum's life, or I swear on whatever it might be. Same idea. And so the familiarity with dishonesty is so commonplace that we're looking to add something extra to convince others that now this time we're honestly telling the truth, and the assumption then being that we will get what we want out of that exchange. It's a distorted way of navigating this system. It's no longer because of the holy reverence for God and the complete confidence and conviction in who he is. That's no longer what is being invoked in an oath. So Jesus says no more. You're not to add value to that. You're not to live in dishonesty. You're not to wriggle and squirm and look for workarounds. That there's no way to do that. There's no added value because we have no control over those things. And this run of don't take an oath either by heaven, for it's God's throne, by earth, for it's his footstool, by Jerusalem, the city of the great king, or by your own head, for you have no ability to make one hair white or black. It's this whole idea of God is the Lord of heaven, he's the king of earth, he's the ruler of the place of peace, and he is the Almighty, even down to the hairs of your head. And so it's again casting the sovereignty of God, and the power of God, the holiness of God. Remember, we are in this space in Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus is teaching and telling us and his disciples, his followers, what being right looks like, what speaking right sounds like, what doing right looks like. He's recasting our understanding of how we live in a way that honors God and is faithful and obedient to God. There are these 6 things, and they come, I believe, in pairs. They're coupled up. There are couplets of things. And what I think we are seeing is in that first couplet of anger and lust, it's about an internal condition. What's your internal condition like. We then move into divorce, which we spoke about in the previous communication, and oaths. They come as a couplet, I believe, and that's talking about your internal condition. And so how are you ready to exchange and interact? How are you, what are your internal value systems and standards like? And then the final couplet of retaliation and of loving your enemies, which are to come in this series. That's a couplet of your external mission. So there's internal position, internal condition, external mission. So we're right in the heart of this run of Jesus teaching and telling people what being right looks like, what it sounds like, and what it moves like, based on your internal position, your internal condition, and then sent on an external mission. And so to do that, the values of the kingdom of God include, but are not limited to, honesty and integrity. And Jesus is recasting a way to live that says your yes must mean yes, and your no means no. There's no value add. You're not looking, because you don't have the ability, the power. You're not the creator. You are not God. And so you can't add extra assurances. If we are not going to be convinced of God and God alone, then you have no ability, no power to add anything extra to that. And as I have been thinking about that and trying to find a way to help us engage with that idea, I want you to think of this image. And sometimes these things and these illustrations can be helpful, and sometimes they can be distracting. So I hope that this is helpful for you. And if it's distracting, then let it go. But in my mind's eye, this is the image that I came up with thinking about these things. I think when we choose dishonest ways, and you might feel threatened by that immediately. You might feel, I don't lie, I tell the truth. And I think on closer inspection, we can maybe see we're more familiar with dishonesty than perhaps we would like to admit or concede. It's not just about law keeping, but the way that we treat other people, the way that we interact with others. Sometimes we out and out lie, and we all understand those moments. But the gradient of that, when was the last time you justified an internal behavior? It's just a little white lie. It's not a big deal. It doesn't really matter, but it's dishonest. And you know that there has been something said or something done or something thought that was dishonest. Jesus says no more. The way of Jesus is of honesty and integrity. And again, to get back to this picture, I think what we can do when we engage in the ways of dishonesty, when we are not close to the values of Jesus, is it feels to me, and I see this picture in my mind's eye, of putting sprinkles on top of broccoli. Putting hundreds and thousands on top of broccoli. Now, sprinkles belong on ice cream. They are to be enjoyed in the sweetness of a dessert. And if we think about that process of a meal, I don't know if you're dessert people in your household or not. I know some people are strange and don't enjoy dessert after a meal, but just imagine that you do. And dessert is the reward. It's the sweet treat. It's the thing that lifts and lightens your palate after whatever it is that you have eaten. And the consequences of dessert are sweetness. And I think often what we metaphorically then try and do is sprinkle the consequences of sweetness to distort and to disguise our dishonesty, to distort and disguise actually what we're trying to get people to consume so that we can get our own way. And so we see from scripture, we understand from Proverbs and from Psalms and from Ezekiel that actually truth is sweet. The consequences of truth are sweetness. And so I think often what we try and do is misuse the things of God to distort and disguise our own kind of distorted way of following Jesus to get what we want. But the only way that we get to real sweetness, to the real payoff, to the real relief, to the real lightness, to genuine sweetness that is good for us and good to us is truth. The consequences of truth are sweet. They are good. They are nourishing. They are satisfying. They fill us. And we can't get that any other way. There's no value add. We have no ability to reach for sprinkles or cherries on top or whatever else you might want to adorn dessert with. This is Jesus reminding us that he is enough. that Jesus is the entire meal, that the consumption of that is sufficient, that we have no ability to add anything extra to our words to convince people that we're no longer lying. But the way that we hold to the values of Jesus, the way that we live with integrity and communicate honesty is exactly that. We say yes and we mean yes. We say no when we mean no. We're not trying to dress things up. We're not trying to hoodwink people. We're not trying to convince people that this time we mean it, and we're not trying to skirt around them. We're not trying to manipulate or abuse. We're not trying to dress something up in a way that it isn't. We're not trying to play with the consequences of something enjoyable so that people will have to consume something less enjoyable. We're not trying to pretend. We're not trying to hide. We're not trying to abuse. We're not trying to, again, manipulate, but actually the consequences of truth are good. The consequences of truth are sweet. The consequences of truth are enjoyable. And so we have to think about, how do I position myself for that? Because often when we tell the truth, it can be in the awareness of, actually, this might not go my way. I have an option here. I can tell the truth and it might not result in the thing that I want it to result in, or I can be dishonest and I can value add and I can look to disguise the thing that I really need to say or do, hoping that I'll get away with it, hoping that I will sneak around it, hoping that I can go to somebody who will justify a way that I can perform or behave or say, if you swear by this or you say by that or you convince me of this, then you will get your own way. Jesus is enough. Jesus is sufficient. Jesus is the completion. Jesus is the fullness. Jesus is the whole meal. Jesus is the completed promise that he is enough. And so from that space, yes becomes yes and no becomes no. I don't need to look to add value externally. I don't need to think that I am more capable of adding value than Jesus alone, and that he is the complete value. There is no one else, there is nowhere else, there is nothing else. And so I say yes when I mean yes, and I say no when I mean no, and I release myself from having to be dishonest. And I no longer have to worry about who I've told what or where, or how I achieve the things that I want to achieve, or how I get the things that I want to be in possession of. Because in Jesus is the fullness of a way of life that sets me free from needing to be dishonest, from needing to corrupt or add value to the things of God, because Jesus is the totality of anything that is of value. We want to engage with these communications, and so I have been concluding them with some questions for you, and I'm asking that you engage with these questions with each other. If you are watching this on your own, then please connect with somebody so that you can ask these questions with each other. However you want to do that, that can be in the group chat, that can be in person, that can be however you want to facilitate that, but please reach out and connect with each other on this. Jesus is enough. So my first question to us: why do we lie? Why do we lie? I think in these moments where we have maybe a reminder of the things of God and we go, oh, I want to live for Jesus. I want to live from that place where I feel that I believe that Jesus is enough. But then we get back into perhaps a way of being or a rhythm of life, or something happens or somebody says something and I'm tempted back into the ways of dishonesty. So let's talk with each other. Why do we lie? Second question: how can we choose the values of Jesus? The values of Jesus, again, include but are not limited to honesty and integrity. How can we choose the values of Jesus? How can we be near to those things? How can we help each other to do that? How can we choose to live a way of life where yes means yes and no means no? And the third one, again, is a statement, not a question. But if you are finding these things difficult, if your yes has not mean yes for a really long time, or no doesn't mean no, and you want help with that, please will you reach out and get in touch, and we can talk about that and we can process some of those things. You cannot figure this stuff out on your own. You're going to need to engage with some people and some processes to understand the full liberty and freedom and what that can look like in your life if you are wrapped in these patterns of dishonesty and you feel that the place that you are in is really disconnected from this way of being, and you're looking for that weight to be lifted from you, for that oppression to be changed to the freedom of being with Jesus, and yes meaning yes and no meaning no, would you reach out and ask for help with that? We want to communicate Jesus to you in those spaces so that you can live in a way that you don't have to look to add value, that you don't have access to. You're not looking to distort what it is that you want to get from people with the consequences of truth, that there's a way of life that is only available in and through and with Jesus, and we believe that that is possible. So will you get in touch if that's you, if you're struggling with that? Let's talk with each other about these things. Let's read again Matthew 5 with each other, and be brilliant, and we'll see you really, really soon.